and welcome to the Daily Devotion video here at Mount Calvary Lutheran Church for Tuesday, December 2nd. My name is Vicar Zachary. This week, we are going through 5 plants in the Bible that hold some level of spiritual significance and diving into the things that God has done with them or the significance that they've had in the Old Testament. Yesterday, we talked about perhaps the most famous plant in all of the Bible, other than the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that would be the mustard seed and the mustard tree. Today, we're going to something that's a little bit more obscure, but I'd still consider this to be one that most people would know. And it actually has more biblical references within the text than even the mustard seed does. And that is the fig and the fig tree. So to begin today's devotion off, I want to read for you one of the instances of the Bible that most people associate with the fig tree. I think this is probably the strongest that most people know. And that comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, beginning on verse 6, the parable of the barren fig tree. And he told this, Jesus, told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came to seeking fruit, and on it found none. And he said to the vine dresser, "Look, for there 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground?" And he, the vine dresser, answered him, "Sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and put on manure. Then if it should not bear fruit next year, well and good. Or if it should bear fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down." Now, to give a bit of context, we're going to jump to one of the other major places in which fig trees are discussed from the Gospel of Mark, and this comes from chapter 11, about halfway through the chapter, beginning on verse 12. And we're going to jump over verses 15 to 19 just because they're not relevant to what we're talking about. But beginning on verse 12, on the following day, when they, Jesus and his disciples, came from Bethany, he, Jesus, was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if it had anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. Jumping to verse 20. As they, Jesus and the disciples, passed in by the morning, they saw the fig tree had withered away by its roots. And Peter remembered what he said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." And Jesus answered him, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to the mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes in what he will come to pass, it will be done for him." So these are the two, I think, most common and ones that most people think of when they think of figs in the Bible, which is first, that the fig tree that Christ curses, and then second, the one in the parable. And what they have in common is that the fig tree is not bearing fruit. Now, the reason why the fig tree is the most commonly referenced plant in the Bible is because it is symbolic of the people of Israel, which makes both of these stories have a lot more sense. Because what God is actually saying, what Christ is actually saying is, look, I have cared for my people for generations. I have brought them out of the desert. I have fed them filled them in the wilderness. I brought them into the promised land. I gave them prophets, judges, kings. And at each and every point, rather than drawing closer to me, they've only gone their separate ways. I put all this effort into growing this people, growing this fig tree, and it's not producing fruit. So it raises the very legitimate question. If the fruit tree is not bearing fruit, what's the point? If the fig tree is not producing what it is supposed to do, why are we wasting ground on it? And it is in that where the parable from Luke, I think, is the most important, because we see that the vine dresser is not immediately in agreement with the master. He's saying, "No, hold on. Let me give it another shot. I know we've been at it for 3 years. Let me spend a whole another year giving it absolutely all the attention I can. I'm going to dig a trench around it. I'm going to fertilize it. I'm going to take care of this tree. And after all that effort, if it still doesn't bear fruit, then we can cut it down." And this is actually a reference to Judgment Day. At the end of that year, This is the point in which God is going to be looking at who has and has not borne fruit in the Spirit. And the fruit in this case is having faith in Jesus Christ. That is the fruit that God is looking for. And that's not what Jesus is finding as he's walking around in Galilee during his time here on earth. Is he's finding a bunch of people who do not have faith. Pharisees and Sadducees who have made an idol out of their knowledge. Men and women who worship other gods or, cohort with pagans. And so, of course, the tree of Israel is not bearing fruit. But God still has compassion upon them. Christ still goes to the cross and he still dies for his people. But we see that is now opened up to the entire world. Now the Gentiles are welcomed in. Now the Gentiles are allowed to become the chosen people. Because the fig tree of Israel is not going to produce fruit, God is going to look elsewhere. And the places that he's looking is to the Gentile people. And that is where we get the church for today. We are all a bunch of various trees, all producing fruit. And that fruit sometimes takes the form of, spiritual gifts that we use, like in the parable of the talents. But it also is just the faith that Christ is building up in all of us through our continued devotion. I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I look forward to continuing our discussion about plants in the Bible tomorrow. Have a blessed rest of your day.